Da, da, da. Okay, for some reason, it does not allow my sound alerts to go out unless I put them on track 2. So right now I have them on 3 and 4, but apparently it only wants me to transmit 2. Okay. Guess I hope so. I'll turn my camera on. Oh yeah, much better. So anyway, I guess you can hear me. I can hear me. The only reason I'm looking into this is because when doing my video editing afterwards, it prevents me from using track 1 and 2 when a sound alert comes on. I have to literally split track 1 to make sure it's stereo. But anyway, I'm running late. About the time I was ready to push the go live button, my doorbell started ringing insistently, and it was my neighbor / mom bringing over her phone for me to fix. So I got that taken care of fairly quickly. But let's go ahead and get into the stories, shall we? Make sure the fireplace isn't going to play ads. The fireplace isn't supposed to have ads. Okay. So we finished up the count show for last week. So we get to go to another author and another set of stories. Oh, that is a horrible name. Flower Dalrymple? Yeah, poor girl. Anyway, so our first story for the night, Followed, by L.T. Meade and Robert Eustance. I am David Ross's wife. I was married to him a month ago, and I have lived through the peril and escaped the danger. What I have lived through, how it happened, and how it happened, and why it happened, the story tells. My maiden name is Flower Dalrymple. I spent my early days on the continent, traveling about from place to place, learning much of the Bohemian life and the Bohemian ways. When I was 18 years of age, my father got an appointment in London. We went to live there, my father, my mother, two brothers, a sister, and myself. Before I was 20, I was engaged to David Ross. David was a landed proprietor. He had good means, and was in my eyes the finest fellow in the world. In appearance he was a stalwart and broad-shouldered, with a complexion as dark as a gypsy. He had a passionate and almost wild look in his eyes, and his wooing of me was very determined, and I might almost say stormy. When he first proposed to me, I refused him from a curious and unaccountable sense of fear, but that night I was miserable, and when 2 days after he repeated his offer, I accepted him, for I discovered that, whatever his character, he was the man I could alone love in all the world. He told me something of his history. His father had died when he was a baby, and he had spent all his intervening years, except when at school, at the university with his mother. His mother's name was Lady Sarah Ross. On her own mother's side she was of Spanish extraction, but she was the daughter of Earl Raleigh. She was a great recluse, and Dave gave me to understand that her character and ways of life were peculiar. "You must be prepared for the eccentricities in connection with my mother," he said. "I see her, perhaps, through rose-colored spectacles, for she is to me the finest and most interesting woman, with the exception of yourself, in the world. Her love for me is a very strange and very deep passion. She has always opposed the idea of my marrying. Until I met you, I have yielded to her very marked wishes with this respect. I can do so no longer. All the same, I am almost afraid to tell her that we are engaged." "Your account of your mother is rather alarming," I could not help myself saying. "Must I live with her after we are married, David?" "Certainly not," he answered, with some abruptness. "You and I will live in my place, Longmoor. She goes by the Dower House." "She will feel being disposed of and thrown very acutely," I said. "It will be our object in life, Flower, not to let her feel it," he answered. "I look forward with the deepest interest in your conquering her, to your winning her love, and when you once win it, it is yours forever." All the time David was speaking, I felt as if he was hiding something. He was holding himself in check. With all his pluck and dash and daring, there was a weight on his mind, something which caused him, although he would not admit it, a curious sensation of uneasiness. We had been engaged for a fortnight when he wrote to the Lady Sarah, apprising her of the fact. His letter received no answer. After a week, by his request, I wrote to her, but neither did she notice my letter. At last, a month after our letters were written, I received a very cordial invitation from Lady Sarah. She invited me to spend Christmas with David and herself at Longmoor. She apologized for her apparent rudeness in not writing sooner, but she said she had not been well. She would give me, she said, a very hearty welcome, and I hoped I would wish the old place in the second week in December, and remain over Christmas. Thank you for the hydrate. "You will have a quiet time," she wrote. "Not dull, for you will be with David. But if you are accustomed to London and the ways of society, you must not expect to find them in Longmoor." Of course, I accepted her invitation. Our wedding was to take place on the 10th of January. My trousseau was well under way, and I started to Longmoor on a certain snowy afternoon, determined to enjoy myself and to like Lady Sarah, in spite of her eccentricities. Longmoor was a rambling old place situated on the borders of Salisbury Plain. The house was built in the form of a cross. The roof was turreted, and there was a tower at one end. The new rooms were in a distant wing. The center of the cross, forming the body of the house, was very old, dating back many hundreds of years. David came to me at Salisbury. He drove a mail phaeton, and I clambered up to my seat by his side. A pair of thoroughbred black horses were harnessed to the carriage. David touched the arched neck of one of his favorites with a whip, and we flew through the air. It was a moonlit night, and I looked at David once or twice. I never regarded him as faultless, but now I saw something in his appearance which surprised me. It was arbitrary and haughty. He had a fierce way of speaking to the man who sat behind. I could guess that his temper was overbearing. "Never mind. No girl could care for David Ross a little. She must love him with all her heart and soul and strength, or hate him. I cared for him all the more because of his faults. He was human, interesting, very tender when he chose, and he loved me with a great love." We arrived at Longmoor within an hour, and found Lady Sarah standing on the steps of the old house to welcome us. She was a tall and very stately woman, with black eyes and a swarthy complexion, a complexion unnaturally dark. Notwithstanding the grace of her appearance, I noticed from the very first there was something wild and uncanny about her. Her eyes were long and almond-shaped. Their usual expression was somewhat languid, but they had a habit of lighting up suddenly at the smallest provocation with a fierce and almost unholy fire. Her hair was abundant and as white as snow, and her very black eyes, narrow arched brows, and dark complexion were brought into sharper contrast by this wealth of silvery hair. She wore black velvet and some very fine Brussels lace. As she came to meet me, I saw the diamonds glittering on her fingers. Whatever her faults, few girls could desire a more picturesque mother-in-law. Without uttering a word, she held out both her hands and drew me into the grand central hall. Then she turned around and looked me all over in the firelight. "Fair and petite," she said. "Blue eyes, lips indifferent red, rest of the features ordinary. An English girl by descent, by education, by appearance. Look at me full in the face, Flower." I did what she bid. She gazed from her superior height into my eyes. As my eyes found hers, I was suddenly overpowered with the most extraordinary feeling which had ever visited me. All through my frame there ran a thrill of ghastly and overmastering fear. I shrank away from her, and I believe my face turned white. She drew me to her side again, stooped, and kissed me, and then she said abruptly, "Don't be nervous." And then she turned to her son. "You have had a cold drive," she said. "I hope you have not taken a chill."
"Dear me, no. Why should I?"
he replied somewhat testily.
"Flower and I enjoyed our rush through the air."
He was rubbing his hands and warming himself by the log fire as he spoke. Now he came to me and drew me towards the genial blaze. Lady Sarah glanced at us both. I saw her lips quiver and her black brows meet across her forehead. A very strange expression narrowed her eyes, a vindictive look from which I turned away. She swept rather than walked across the hall and rang a bell. A neatly dressed, pleasant-looking girl appeared. "Take Miss Dalrymple to her room, Jessie, and attend on her," said Lady Sarah. I was conducted up some low stairs and down a passage to a pretty, modern-looking room. "Longmoor is very old, miss," said Jessie, "and some of it is even tumbling to pieces. But Lady Sarah is never one for repairs. You won't find anything old, however, in this room, miss, for it has not been built more than 10 years. You'll have a lovely view of Salisbury Plain from here in the morning, and I'm glad, very glad, Miss Dalrymple, that you are not put into one of the rooms in the other wing." I did not ask Jessie the meaning of her words. I thought she looked at me in an expressive way, but I could not meet her glance. When I was ready, Jessie conducted me to the drawing room, where I found David standing on the rug in front of the log fire. "Where is your mother?" I asked.
"She will be down presently. I say, what a pretty little girl it is,"
he cried, and he opened his big arms and folded me in a close embrace. Just at that moment I heard a rustle of a silk dress, and turning saw Lady Sarah. She wore a rich ruby gown, which rustled and glistened every time she moved. I tore myself from David's arms and faced her. There was a flush in my cheeks and in my eyes, I'm sure. They were suspiciously bright. She called me to her side and began to talk in a gentle and pleasant way. Suddenly she broke off. "Dinner is late," she said. "Ring the bell, David." David's summons were answered by a black servant, a man with the most peculiar and, I must add, forbidding face I had ever seen.
"Is dinner served, Sambo?"
inquired the mistress.
"It's on the table, missus,"
replied in excellent English. Lady Sarah got up. "David," she said, "will you take Flower to her place at the dinner table?" David led the way with me. Lady Sarah followed. David took the foot of the table, his mother at the head. I sat at Lady Sarah's left hand. During the meal which followed, she seemed to forget all about me. She talked incessantly on matters relating to the estate and her son. I observed that she was a first-rate businesswoman, and I noticed David listened to her with respect and interest. Her eyes never raised themselves to meet his without a softened, extraordinary expression filling them. It was a look of devouring and overmastering love. His eyes, as he looked into hers, had very much the same expression. Even at me he had never quite looked like this. It was as if two kindred souls, absolutely kindred in all particulars, were holding converse with each other, and as if I, David, affianced wife, only held the post of interloper. Sambo, the black servant, stood behind Lady Sarah's chair. He made a striking figure. He was dressed in long, soft, full trousers which Easterners wear. I learnt afterwards that Sambo was an aborigine from Australia, but Lady Sarah had a fancy to dress him as though he hailed from the Far East.
"No problem, Talca. Enjoy the lurking."
The color of his silken garments was a rich, deep yellow. Short's jacket was much embroidered in silver, and he had a yellow turban twisted around his swarthy head. His waiting was a perfection of the art. He attended on your slightest wants, and never made any sound as he glided about the apartment. I did not like him, however. I felt nearly as uncomfortable in his presence as I did in that of Lady Sarah. We lingered for some time when the meal was over. Then Lady Sarah rose. "Come, Flower," she said. She took my hand in one of hers. "You will join us, David, when you have had your smoke," she continued as she laid her shapely hand across her son's broad forehead. He smiled at her.
"All right, mother," he said. "I shall not be long."
His black eyes fell from his mother's face to mine, and he smiled at me, a smile of such heart-whole devotion that my momentary depression ceased. Lady Sarah took me to the drawing room. There she made me seat myself in a low chair by her side and began to talk. "Has David ever told you of my peculiar tastes, my peculiar recreations?" "No," I replied. "All he has really told me about you, his mother, is that you love him with a very great love, and that he feared our marriage would pain you." "Tut," she replied. "Do you imagine that a little creature like you can put a woman like me out? But we won't talk personal things tonight. I want you to see the great charm of my present life. You must know that I have for several years eschewed society. David has mingled with his kind, but I have stayed home with my faithful servant Sambo and my pets. Your pets, I said. Dogs, horses? Neither. Cats then, or perhaps birds? I detest cats and always poison any stray animal that may breed to come along in Longmore. It is true I keep a few pigeons, but they are for special use. I also keep rabbits for the same purpose. Then what kind of pets do you have? I asked. Reptiles, she said shortly. Would you like to see them? I longed to say to Lady Sarah that nothing would induce me to look at her horrible pets, but I was afraid. She gazed full at me, and I nodded my head. Her face was white, and her lips had taken on once more that hard, straight line which terrified me. She rose from her seat and took my hand and led me across the drawing room to the hall. We crossed the hall to the west, where she opened a glass door and motioned me to follow her. We went down some stairs that were narrow and winding. At the bottom of the stairs was a door. Lady Sarah took a key from her pocket and fitted it into the lock and opened the door. A blast of wintry air blew in my face, and some scattered, newly fallen snow wetted my feet. I forgot about the snow, she said. The reptile house is only just across the yard. It is warm there, but if you are afraid of wetting your feet, say so. I am not afraid, I replied. That is good. Then come with me. She held up her ruby-colored silk dress, and I caught a glimpse of her neat ankles and shapely feet. On the other side of the stone yard was a building standing by itself and completely surrounded with a high fence of closely meshed wire netting. Lady Sarah opened a door in the fence with another key, and then she locked it carefully behind her. With a third key she unfastened the door of the building itself. When she opened this door, the air from within, hot and moist, struck on my face. She pushed me in before her, and I stood just within the entrance while she lit a lantern. As the candle caught the flame, I uttered a sudden cry, for against my arm, with only glass between, I saw a huge mottled snake, which, startled by the sudden light, was coiling to and fro. Its black forked tongue flickered across its lips as if it were angry at being disturbed in its slumbers. I drew back from the glass quickly and caught Lady Sarah's eyes fixed upon me with a strange smile. My pets are here, she said, and this is one. I was a great traveler in my youth, and as was my father before me. After my husband died, I again went abroad. When David's education was finished, he went with me. I inherited my father's taste for snakes and reptiles, and I've lived for my pets for many long years now, and I fancy I possess the most superb private collection in the kingdom. Look for yourself, Flower. This is Vipera nasciornis, or in our English language, the African nose-horned snake. Pray notice his flat head. He is a fine specimen, just 9 feet long. I caught him myself on the Gold Coast with my friend Jane Ashley. Is he venomous? I asked. My lips trembled so that I could scarcely get the words out. 4 hours a man, was the laconic reply. We count the degree of poison of a man by the time a man lives after he's bitten. This fellow is, therefore, comparatively harmless. You see, here is the Pseudoclus porphyrosus, the black snake of Tasmania and Australia. His time is 6 minutes. Wake up, darky! And she tapped the glass with her knuckles. The enormous glittering coil, polished as ebony, moved and reared its head. and disappeared into a shadow of the wall. I gave a visible shudder, and Lady Sarah took no notice. She walked slowly between the cases, explaining various aptitudes and peculiars with regard to her favorites. "Here are the puff adders," she said. "Here are the ring snakes. In this cage are the whip snakes. Ah, and here's a dreaded moccasin from Florida. Here are the black vipers from the South African mountains and the copperheads from the Peruvian swamps. I have a pet name for each," she continued. "They are as my younger children." As she said the words, it flashed across my mind for the first time that perhaps Lady Sarah was not in her right senses. The next instant her calm and dignified voice dispelled my suspicions. "I've shown you my treasures," she said. "I hope you will think it a great honor. My father, the late Lord Rayleigh, had a passion for reptiles almost equal to my own. The one thing I regret about David is that he has not inherited it." "But are you not afraid to keep your collection here?" I asked. "Do you not dread some of them escaping?" "I take precautions," she said shortly, "and to have any personal fear, I do not know the meaning of the word. My favorites know me, and after their fashion they love me." As she spoke, she slid back one of the iron doors, and reaching in her hand, took out a huge snake that deliberately whipped the creature around her neck. "This is my dear old carpet snake," she said. "Quite harmless. You can come close and touch him, if you like." "No, thank you," I replied. She put the snake back again and locked the door. We returned to the drawing room. I went and I stood by the fire, as I was trembling all over, but not altogether from the coldness of the atmosphere. "You were nervous," said Lady Sarah. "I thought you brave a few minutes ago. The sight of my beauties has shocked you. Will you oblige me by not telling David tonight that I have shown them to you?" I bowed my head, and just at that moment David himself entered the room. He went to the piano and, almost without prelude, began to sing. He had a magnificent voice, like a great organ. Lady Sarah joined him. He and she sang together the wildest, weirdest, most extraordinary songs I had ever listened to. They were mostly Spanish. Suddenly Lady Sarah took out her guitar and began to play, David accompanying her on the piano. The music lasted for about an hour. Then Lady Sarah shut the piano. "The little white English girl is very tired," she said. "Flower, you must go to bed immediately. Good night." When I reached my room, I found Jessie waiting to attend me. She asked me once if I had seen the reptiles. "Yes," I said. "And aren't you nearly dead with terror from them, miss?" "I was a little afraid of them," I said. "Is there any fear of their escaping?" "No, no, miss. Who would stay in a house if there were? You need not be frightened. This is a queer house, very queer all the same." The next day after breakfast, David asked me if I had seen his mother's pets. "I have," I replied, "but she asked me not to mention that fact to you last night. David, I'm afraid of them. Must I stay here when I come to live at Longmoor?" "The Marjorie goes, and her darlings with her," he answered, as he gave a sigh, and a shadow crossed his face. "Are you sorry to part with your dear mother?" I said. "I shall miss her," he replied. "Even you, Flower, cannot take the place that my mother occupies in my heart, but I shall see her daily, and you are worth sacrificing something for, my little white English blossom."
You look the part. You are very much like a flower in the field. Your pretty name and your pretty ways and your fair complexion foster the idea. Mother admires you. She thinks you're very sweet to look at. Now, come into the morning room and talk to her." That day, after lunch, it rained heavily. We were all in the morning room in a somewhat dismal apartment when David turned to his mother. "By the way, Madre," he said, "I want to have the jewels reset for Flower." "What do you say?" inquired his mother. "I mean to have the diamonds and the other jewels reset for my wife," he replied slowly. "I don't think it matters," said Lady Sarah. "Matters?" cried David. "I don't understand you. Flower must have the jewels made up to suit her petite appearance. I should like her to see them. Will you give me the key to the safe, and I will bring them into this room?" "You can show them, of course," said Lady Sarah. She spoke in a careless tone. He looked at her and shrugged his shoulders, and I was surprised to see an angry light leap into his eyes. He took the key without a word and left the room. I sat down on the nearest window ledge, a small, slight, very fair girl. No one could feel more uncomfortable and out of place. David returned with several morocco cases. He put them on the table, then he opened them one by one. The treasures within were magnificent. There were necklaces and bracelets and rings and tiaras innumerable. David fingered them, and Lady Sarah stood close by. "This tiara is too heavy for you, Flower," said David suddenly. As he spoke, he picked up a magnificent circlet of flashing diamonds and laid them against my golden head. The next moment the ornament was rudely snatched away by Lady Sarah. She walked to a glass which stood between two windows and fitted the tiara over her own head. "Too heavy for Flower, and it suits you, Mother," said the young man, his eyes flashing with sudden, genuine admiration. She laid the tiara on the table. "Leave the things as they are for the present," she said. "It is not necessary to have them altered. You are marrying a flower, remember, and flowers of the field do not need this sort of adornment." She tried to speak quietly, but her lips trembled and her words came in jerks. "And I don't want to wear them," I cried. "I don't like them." "That is speaking in a very childish way," said Lady Sarah. "You must wear them when you're presented, dear," remarked David. "But there's enough time. I will put these things away for the present." The jewels were returned to the safe, and I breathed a sigh of relief. That night I was tired out and slept well, and the next morning was a glorious one, more like spring than midwinter. David proposed that he and I should spend the day driving the southward plain and seeing the celebrated stones. He went to the stables to order the dog-cart to be ready, and I ran up to my room to put on my hat and warm jacket. When I came back to the hall, my future mother-in-law was standing there. Her face was calm and her expression mild and genial. She kissed me almost affectionately, and I went off to David with high spirits. My fearfulness lumbered into slumber. He knew every inch of the famous Stonehenge, and told me many of the legends about its origin. There was one stone in particular which we spent some time in observing. It was inside the circle, a flat, broad stone with a depression in the middle. "This," said David, "is called the Slaughter Stone. On this stone the Druids killed their victims." "Oh, how interesting and how horrible!" I cried. "It is true," he answered. "These stones dating back to the ages of the past have always had a queer fascination with me. I love them almost as much as my mother does. She often comes here when her nerves are not at their best and wanders about the magic circle for hours." David told me many other legends. We lunched and had tea in a small town of Wilton, and did not return home till some time late after dinner. I went to my room and saw nothing of Lady Sarah until I entered the drawing-room. There I found David and his mother in earnest conversation. His face looked full of annoyance. "I am sorry," said Lady Sarah. "I am afraid, Flower, you will have to make up your mind in having a dull day alone with me tomorrow." "But why dull?" interrupted David. "Flower will enjoy a day by herself with your mother. She wants to know you. She wants to love you. And I trust you will soon love her." Lady Sarah made no answer. After a pause, during which an expression of annoyance and displeasure visited her thin lips, she said, "An urgent telegram has arrived from our lawyers for David. He must go to town the first train in the morning." "I will come back tomorrow. I will come back tomorrow night, little girl," he said. He patted me on my head as he spoke, and I did not attempt to raise any objection. A moment later we went to the dining room. During the meal I was much disturbed by the persistent way in which Sambo watched me. Without exception, Sambo had the ugliest face I had ever seen. His eyes were wide apart and wildly staring out of his head. His features were twisted, had very thick lips, and the whole of the lower part of his face was in undue prominence. But ugly as he was in feature, there was a certain dignity about him. His very upright carriage, his very graceful movements, his very picturesque dress could not but impress me, although perhaps in a measure they added to the uneasiness with which I regarded him. I tried to avoid his gaze, but whenever I raised my eyes I encountered his, and in consequence I had very little appetite for dinner. The evening passed quickly, and again that night I slept well. When I awoke it was broad daylight, and Jessie was pouring hot water into a bath for me. "Miss Ross went off more than 2 hours ago, miss," she said. "He left a message that I should be very attentive to you, so if you want for anything, I certainly hope you will ask for it." "Certainly I will," I replied. Jessie was a pretty girl with a rosy face and bright, pleasant eyes. I saw her fix these eyes upon my face. She came close to me. "I am very glad you are going to marry Mr. Ross," she said. "I am very glad that you will be a mistress here, for if there was not to be a change soon, I could not stay." "What do you mean?" I said. She shrugged her shoulders significantly. "This is a queer house," she said. "There are queer people in it, and there are queer things done in it, and there are the reptiles." I gave an involuntary shiver. "There are the reptiles," she repeated. "Lady Sarah and Sambo play tricks with them at times. Sambo has got stuff that drives him nearly mad. When Lady Sarah's at her wildest he uses it. I have watched them when they didn't know what I was looking. Half a dozen of the snakes followed Sambo as if they were detented, and Lady Sarah looking on and laughing. He puts a thing in his boots. I do not know what it is, and they never hurt him. He flings the boots at them, and they are quiet. Yes, it is a queer house, and I am afraid of the reptiles. By the way, miss, would you not like me to clean your boots for you?" "Why so?" I asked. My face was turned white, and my teeth were chattering. Her words unnerved me considerably. "I will if you like," she said. "Sambo shan't have them. Now, miss, I think you have everything you want." She left me, and I dressed as quickly as I could. As soon as my eyes fell upon the little pair of brown boots, for which I had a special affinity, they were polished up brightly. No boots could be more pleasant, beautifully cleaned. What did Jessie mean? What did she mean, too, by Lady Sarah's wild fits? I went downstairs to find Lady Sarah in a genial humor. She was smiling and quite agreeable. Sambo did not wait at breakfast, and in consequence we had a pleasant meal. When it was over, she took my hand and led me to her morning room. "Come here," she said. "I want to speak to you. So, you are David's choice. Now listen. The aim and object of my life, if I ever lost my husband, has been to keep David single." "What do you mean?" I asked. "What I say. I love my son with a passion which you little white creature, cannot comprehend. I want him for myself, entirely. You have dared to step in. You have dared to take him from me. But listen, even if you do marry him, you won't keep him long. You would like to know why? I will tell you. Because his love for you is the only passion which a man may experience for a pair of blue eyes and a white skin and a childish figure. It is as water upon wine compared to the love he feels for me. He will soon return to me. Be warned in time. Give him up. I cannot, I said. You won't be happy here. Your life is not your life. The man is not the right sort of man for you. In some ways he is half a savage. He has been much wild in countries and lands uninhabited by civilized people. He is not the man for you, nor am I the mother-in-law for you. Give him up. Here's a paper and here's a pen. Write him a letter. Write it now. And the carriage shall be at the door, and you will be taken to Wilton. And there you can get a train to London, and you will be safe, little girl. Quite safe. You ask the impossible, I replied. I love your son. She had spoken with earnestness. The flame color came to her cheeks, her eyes very bright. Now her face grew cold and almost leaden in hue. I have given you your choice in the way of escape, she said. If you don't take the offer, it is not my fault. She walked out of the room. What did she mean? I stayed where she had left me. I was trembling all over. Terrors of the world, overmastering and unreasoning sort, visited me. All I had lived through since I came from Longmore now flooded my imagination and made me weak with nervous fears. The reptile house, Lady Sarah, Sambo's strange behavior, Sambo's wicked glance, Jessie's words. Oh, why had I come? Why had David left me alone in this terrible place? I got up and left the room and strode into the grounds. The grounds were beautiful, but I could find no pleasure in them. Over and over the desire to run away visited me. I only restrained my nervous longing for David's sake. He would never forgive me if I left Longmore before, because I feared his mother. The gong sounded for lunch, and I went into the house. Lady Sarah was seated at the table. Sambo was absent. I have had a busy morning, she said. Darky is ill. Darky? I exclaimed. Yes, the black snake whose bite kills in 6 minutes. Sambo is with him. He and I have been giving him some medicine. I trust he will be better soon. He is my favorite reptile, a magnificent creature. I made no remark. I'm afraid you must amuse yourself the best you can this afternoon, she continued. Sambo and I will be engaged with the snake. I am sorry I cannot offer to send you for a drive, but 2 of the horses are out and the bay mare is lame. I said I would amuse myself and that I should not require the use of any of the horses, and she left me. I did not trouble to go to the plain. I resumed my restless wanderings about the place. I wondered as I did so if Longmore could ever be a real home for me. As moments flew past, I looked at my watch, counting the hours to David's return. When he was back, surely the untangible danger which I could not feel but surrounded me would be over. At 4 o'clock, Sambo brought tea for one in the drawing room. He laid it down with a peculiar expression. You will be sorry to hear, Missy, he said, that Mr. Ross is not coming back tonight. The man spoke in a queer kind of broken English. I sprang to my feet, my heart beating violently. Sorry, Missy, business captain. Telegram to Mrs. Not coming back till morning. Yeah, Missy, why you stay? What do you mean? I asked. The man had a hazel wand in his hand. I had noticed it without curiosity up to that point. Now he took it and pointed at me. As he did, he uttered the curious words, Olenka. The evil glitter in his eyes frightened me so much that I shrank up against the wall. "Oh, what are you doing that for?" I cried. He snapped the stick in two and flung it behind him.
Missy, you take Sambo's word and go right away tonight. Missy know well, Darky know well, Sambo know well. No place for Missy with blue eyes and fair hair. I say Olinka, and Olinka mean dead's the fellow magic stick. Missy run to Wilton, take the train from Wilton to London, short track cross plain. Missy, go quick. Old Sambo open the gate wide and let her go. Missy, go soon.
"Do you mean it?" I said.
Yeah, yes.
"Oh, go," I said. "You terrify me. Can I have a carriage?"
No time, Missy. No Missy Olsons find out. Oh, Missus no wish it. Missy go quick. Cross the plains, the short track Wilton. Moon come up short time.
"Oh, go," I whispered.
Missy take me first and then get ready, said Sambo. Sambo wait till Missy come downstairs.
I did not want the tea, but the man brought me a cup ready poured out.
One cup strengthen Missy, then short track cross plains, straight ahead Wilton. Moon and sky. Missy safe from the old missus, from Darky, from Sambo.
I drank the tea and had not touched the cake or bread or butter. I went to my room, fear at my heels. In my terror I forgot to remark, although I remembered it well afterwards, that some extraordinary reason most of my boots and shoes had disappeared. A little favorite pair of brown boots was still waiting for me. I put them on, buttoned them up quickly, and put on my fur coat and cap, with my purse in my pocket, and ran downstairs. No matter what David thought of me now, there was something terrible in this house, an unknown and indescribable fear. I must get away from Longmore at any cost. Sambo conducted me without a word to the garden and out to the plain through the wicket gate.
Quick, Missy,
he said, and he vanished from view, shutting and locking the gate behind him. It was a perfect evening, still and cold. The sun was near the horizon, would set soon. The full moon was just rising. I determined to walk briskly. I was strong and active, and the distance between Longmore and Wilton did not frighten me. I would cross the plain directly from Longmore. Within 2 hours, at the longest, would reach Wilton. My walk would lead past Stonehenge. The plain looked weird in the moonlight. It looked unfathomable. It seemed to stretch into space with no ending. Walking fast and running in intervals, pausing now and then to take my breath, I continued my fearful journey. Was Lady Sarah mad? Was Sambo mad? And what ailed Darky, the awful black snake whose bite caused death in 6 minutes? The thought of Darky came to me, making my heart throb until I thought it would stop. I felt a strange and unknown sensation of fatigue creeping over me. My feet began to lag. I could not account for this. I took out my watch and looked at it. I felt so tired that to go on without a short rest was impossible. There was a stone near. I sat on it for a moment or two. While resting, I tried to collect my scattered thoughts. I wondered what sort of story I would tell David, how I would appease his anger and justify him with that the flying and running away from the house, which was soon to be my own. And these thoughts came to me as I closed my eyes. My head felt floating. Then all was lost in unconsciousness. I woke after what seemed a moment's sleep to find I'd been sitting on a stone for over half an hour. I felt refreshed by my slumber, started now to continue my walk rapidly. I went lightly over the springy turf and knew my bearings well, for David had explained everything to me on our long expedition yesterday. I must have gone over a mile right on the bare plain when I began once again to experience a queer and unaccountable sensation of weakness. My pace slowed down, and I longed again to rest. I resolved to resist the sensation and continued on my way, but more slowly now, with a heavily beating heart. My heart labored in a most unnatural way. I could not account for my own sensations. Suddenly I paused and looked back, and fancied I heard a noise, very slight and faint, and different from that which the wind made as it sighed across the vast, billowy undulations of the plain. Now as I looked, I saw something about 50 yards away, something which moved very swiftly over the short grass. Whatever the thing was, it came towards me, and as the night glistened now and then in the moonlight. What could it be? I raised my hand to shade my eyes from the very bright light of the moon. I wondered if it had been a subject of hallucination. But no, whatever that which was now approaching me was in reality no dream. It was making its way directly in my direction. Next instant every fiber of my body was tingling with terror, for gliding across me in great curves, with head raised, was an enormous black snake. For one moment I gazed in sickened horror, and then I ran. I ran as one runs from a nightmare, with heart thumping and clogging feet and knees that would turn into water. There could be no doubt of what had happened. Great black snake, Darky, had escaped from Longmore and was following me. Why had it escaped? How had it escaped? Was it escape premeditated? Was I meant to follow me? Was I a victim of a prearranged ghastly death? Was it? My head reeled and my knees tottered. There was not a tree or a house in sight. The bare, open plain surrounded me for miles. As I reeled, however, to the rise of the crest, I saw, lying in the moonlight, not a quarter of a mile away, the broken ring of Stonehenge. I reached in time to clamber onto one of the stones. I might be saved. It was my only chance. Summoning all my energies, I made for the ruined temple. For the first 100 yards I felt that I was gaining on the brute, though I could hear, close to my tracks, its low, continuous hiss. Then the deadly faintness for which I could not account for once seized me again. I fancied I heard someone calling me in a dim voice which sounded miles away. Making less frantic effort, I plunged into the circle of stones and madly clambered on the great slaughter stone. Once more there came a cry. A figure flashed past me, and a report rang out in my ears. A great darkness came over me.
Drink this, Flower.
I was laying on my back. Drink this, Flower. I was laying on my back. Lady Sarah was bending over me. The moonlight was shining, and it dazzled my eyes when I first opened them. In the moonlight I could see Lady Sarah's face was very white. There was a peculiar expression about it. She put her hand gently and deftly on my head, and held something to my lips. I drank a hot, fiery mixture and was revived. Where am I? What has happened? I asked. You are on the great slaughter stone on the Salisbury Plain. You've had a narrow escape. Don't speak. I'm going to take you home. Back to Longmire? Yes, back to Longmore. Your future home. Don't be silly. But the snake, Darky, the black snake. I cowered and pressed my face in my hands. He followed me here. He followed me, I whispered. He is dead, she answered. I shot him with my own hands. You have nothing to fear from me or my Darky any more. Come. I was too weak to resist her. She did not look unkind. There was no madness in her eyes. The moment Sambo appeared in view, Sambo lifted me from the stone and carried me to a dog cart which stood on the plain. Lady Sarah seated herself by my side and took the reins, and we drove swiftly away. Once again we entered the house. Lady Sarah took me to the morning room. She shut the door, but did not lock it. There was a basin of hot soup on the table. Drink and be quick, she said in an imperious voice. I obeyed her. I was afraid to do otherwise. Better? She asked. Yes, I replied in a semi-whisper. Then listen. I tried to rise, but she motioned me to stay seated. The peril is past, she said. You have lived through it. You are a plucky girl, and I respect you. Now hear what I have to say. I tried to do so and keep down my trembling. Her eyes fixed on me, and she spoke. Long ago I made a vow, she said. I solemnly vowed before Almighty God that as long as I lived, I would never allow my only son to marry. He knew that I had made this vow, and for a long time he respected it. But he met you and became engaged to you in defiance of his mother's vow and his wishes.
When I heard the tidings, I lost my senses. I became wild with jealousy, rage, and real madness. I would not write to you, nor would I write to him. Why did you write at last? Why did you ask me here? I said then. Because the jealousy had passed, as it always does. For a time I was sane. Sane! I cried. Yes, little girl, yes, sane. But listen, some years ago when on the coast of Guinea I was victim to a very severe sunstroke. From time to time I've had fits of madness. Any shock, any excitement brings them on. I had such a fit of madness when my son wrote to say that he was engaged to you. It passed, and I was myself again. You were not in the house for an hour. However, I felt it returning. There's only one person who can manage me at these times. There's only one person whom I fear and respect. My black servant Sambo. Sambo manages me, and yet at the same time I manage him. He loves me after his blind and heathen fashion. He has no fear, he has no conscience. To commit a crime is nothing to him. He loves me, and he passionately loves the reptiles. To please me and to carry out my wishes are his sole objects in life. With madness in my veins, I watched you and David during the last 2 days, and a wild desire to crush you to the very earth came over me. David went to London, and I thought the opportunity had come. I spoke to Sambo about it, and Sambo made a suggestion. I listened to him. My brain was on fire. I agreed to do what he suggested. My snake Darky was to be the weapon to take your life. I felt neither remorse nor pity. Sambo was a black from Australia, an aborigine from that distant country. He knows the secrets of the blacks. There is a certain substance extracted from an herb which the blacks know, and which, when applied to any part of the dress or on a person of an enemy, will induce each snake which comes across his path to turn and follow him. The substance drives the snake mad, and he will follow and kill his victim. Sambo possesses the stuff, and from time to time, to amuse me, he has tried its power on my reptiles. He has put it on his own boots, but he himself has never been bitten, for he has flung the boots at the snakes at the last moment. This afternoon he put it on the brown boots which you are now wearing. Then he terrified you and induced you to run across the Salisbury Plain. He put something into your tea to deprive you of your strength, and when you were absent for 3/4 of an hour, he let Darky loose. Darky followed you as a needle will follow a magnet. Sambo called me to the wicket gate and showed me the glistening creature gliding over the plains in your direction. As I looked, a veil fell from my eyes. The madness left me, and I became sane. I saw the awful thing that I had done. I repented with agony. In a flash I ordered the dog-cart with Sambo on my side, and I followed you. And just in time I shot my favorite reptile, and you were saved. Lady Sarah wiped the drops of perspiration from her forehead. You are quite safe, she said after a pause, and I am sane. What I did when I was not accountable, and you are going to tell. Are you going to tell David? How can I keep it from him? It seems hard to you now, but I ask you to do it. I promise not to oppose your marriage, and I will go meekly to the dower house. I am tired of the reptiles. My favorite is dead, and the others are nothing to me. They shall be sent as a gift to the zoological gardens. Now, will you tell David? If you do, I shall shoot myself tonight. Think for an hour, and tell me your decision. She left the room. How I endured that hour I do not know. At the end of it I went to seek her. She was pacing up and down the great hall. I ran to her and tried to take her hand, but she held her hands behind her. He will love you, he will worship you, and I, his old mother, will be nothing to him. What are you going to do? She said then. I will never tell him, I whispered. She looked hard at me, and then her great black eyes softened. You are worthy to be his wife, she said in a hoarse voice, and she left me. I am David's wife, and David does not know. He will never know. We are still on our honeymoon, but David is in trouble. For the very last post news he reached him of Lady Sarah's sudden death.
was absent from her when she breathed her last. We shall never know the worst. We shall always treasure her memory in his heart.
Oh, made it just before the ads. We'll be back after these quick commercial break. I was not sure I would be able to finish that story. And my computer, or at least the browsers, are acting up. Well, OBS says I'm back on. Norton is saying that it's blocked access to StreamerX.net because one of the issuers of these certificates has expired. I have no idea what that means. I don't even know what StreamerX.net is. Let me try. Okay, now it's saying I've got an excellent connection again, so I guess that's a good thing. I've got a screen cap of the error message so I can check it later. But yeah, I was not sure I would be able to finish that last story. Yes, we are back. I'm not sure how well my computer's acting up. It's always giving me, like, freezing errors. Well, Kel is reminding everyone that I have a YouTube channel where everything is. What? My closed caption said something about the zoo is where the prisoners are. I'm kind of curious what's going on. Let's see, how long is this next story? Next story is 14 pages. So not as long as the previous one. Hopefully I'll be able to get through this one before the next ads are full. Same authors. I'm guessing it's going to be a male narrator. Always gotta check. Okay. Next story for tonight is it's definitely going to be a 2-story night with the way these things are going. The Secret of Emu Plain by L.T. Meade and Robert Eustance, authors of A Master of Mysteries. It so happened that business called me to Queensland in the late October of 1894, and hearing that my old friend Rosamond Dale was about to be married, I determined to present myself at Jim McDonald's station on the Barcoo district in December, in order to be present at the ceremony. I had seen a good deal of Rosamond when she was a child, and it was an old promise of mine that, if possible, I was to be one of her guests at the wedding. I arrived at McDonald's a week before Christmas, and when a hot wind or sirocco was blowing through in the west, a little thought, as I did so, that the strangest and most terrible adventures of my life was about to take place in the Queensland bush. But So it was, and this is the story just as it happened. I had been delayed on my journey, and on the evening of my arrival, the wedding was to take place. MacDonald's property was about 750 square miles in extent, and was in the heart of the hills, which are the fountainhead of the countless creeks and run south to form the Warrego and eventually the Great Darling River, some 400 miles away. It was a good grazing country on the whole, but contained one enormous tract of arid sand, some 40 square miles in extent, which went in the same name, the Emu Plain. Skirting one corner of this plain ran a coach road from Blackall to Charleville, and along ran Cobb and Co.'s coach once a fortnight. Almost in the middle of the plain stood a solitary grandeur of the great Emu Rock, a grotesque, bare, perpendicular crag of limestone slicing sheer 300 feet above the ground. Leaving my heavy luggage in Blackwall, I had come with the advice by Cobb and Co.'s coach to the crossroads, and had then ridden over to MacDonald's house in a low wooden homestead in a one-story, with a veranda running all around it. The sitting rooms opened into the veranda. There was a garden at the back, enclosed by a fence. MacDonald met me with the words of a wholesome welcome. "You're late, Belle," he exclaimed. "Rosamond has been waiting impatiently for your arrival all day. She never forgets how good you were to her when she was a child, and all alone in the old country. But let me take you to her room for a tub and a brush-up, and she would like to see you for a moment or two before the wedding." Jim took me to my apartment, the left wing of their house, and half an hour later I joined Rosamond Dale on the balcony. She was a handsome, dark-eyed girl with a bright, vivacious face and sparkling eyes. She had changed much in her appearance since I had last seen her, as a small and somewhat awkward schoolgirl, but her affectionate heart and her frank manners were still abundantly manifest. She made me seat myself in a deck chair and began at once to talk about her bridegroom. Goodwin was the best man in the world. She loved him with all her heart and soul, and she liked the life in the bush too. Notwithstanding its loneliness, there was an element of excitement about it which quite suited her nature. As she spoke to me, I noticed that she looked anxiously out, and shading her eyes with her hand, I saw them travel across the paddock and up the road. "What's the matter, Rosamond?" I said at last. "And by the way," I added, "won't you introduce me to Mr. Goodwin?"
"He has not come yet. I cannot understand it," replied the girl. "He ought to have been here an hour ago. His station is just about 30 miles from here, just across Emu Plain."
"What a hideous piece of desolation that Emu Plain is," I answered. "I skirted in the coach and never saw anything so repulsive in my life." I noticed that Rosamond shuddered, and her face turned pale.
"It is an ugly place," she said at last, "and bears a bad name."
"What do you mean by that?" I answered.
"You will laugh at me, Mr. Bell," was her reply, "but people in that plain is haunted. Some most extraordinary disappearances have taken place from that time to time. If Frank came across the plain, there is no saying, but—"
She looked me full in the face.
"I'm surely frightening myself over nothing," she said. "But will you excuse me a moment? I must go to the drawing room and ask if there's any news from Frank."
She rose, and I followed her into the room behind the veranda. I there, for the first time, made Mrs. MacDonald's acquaintance. She was a hearty, good-natured looking woman, with eyes like Rosamond's. She seemed devotedly attached to her niece, and now went up to the girl and kissed her affectionately.
"Your uncle has just gone off to meet Frank," she said. "They are sure to be here in a few moments."
She spoke cheerfully, but I felt uncertain. I noticed the veiled anxiety in her eyes. At that moment, a man crossed the room and came up to Rosamond and held out his hand. "How do you do, Mr. Corey?" This is supposed to be her.
"How do you do, Mr. Corey?"
said the girl gravely. She had a beautiful dark eyes with magnificent lashes, as I observed, as Corey spoke to her, and she lowered them and avoided looking at him. He was a tall, thin man with red hair and a slight cast in one eye. His lips were thin, the thinnest I had ever seen, and the expression, joined to the cast in the eye, gave him a sinister look. He was on good terms, however, with all the guests, and had the manners of a gentleman. Rosamond returned to the veranda, and I followed her. "Are you really nervous about anything?" I said. "Is it possible that you apprehend that an accident has happened to Goodwin?"
"How can I tell?"
she answered, and now looked agony across her strong face.
"He ought to be here before now. He has never failed before. And on the wedding evening, too. The Plain is haunted, you know, Mr. Bell. Don't laugh at me when I say that. I believe the ghost of Emu Plain."
"You must tell me more," I answered. "You know," I continued with a smile, "that I am interested in ghosts." She could not return my smile. Her face grew wider and wider. "And who is that man Corey?" I said after a pause.
"Oh, never mind about him," she answered impatiently. "He has a selection about 20 miles from here, and is, I believe, an Englishman. I cannot think what is keeping Frank," she added. "Ah, thank God, I hear horses' roofs at last."
She ran to the farther end of the veranda and stood there, gazing up the road in the most longing, perplexed expression I had ever seen on a human face. Alas, only one rider was returning, and that was MacDonald himself. He came in cheerfully, and Frank might appear at any moment, and suggested we all go to supper. At that meal I noticed Rosamond almost played with her food. She was seated near Mr. Lee, the clergyman from the nearest township, who had come over to marry her. He talked to her in low tones, and she replied listlessly. It was evident that her thoughts were on her absent lover, and that she could not think of anything else. At last the miserable meal had dragged to an end, and the evening passed away somehow, and different guests retired to their rooms. By and by MacDonald and I found ourselves alone. "And now what is up?" I said, going to him at once. "Jim, what is the meaning of this?"
"God only knows," was his reply. "I don't like it, though, and that's a fact. You notice the big plane you came along by the coach?"
"Emu Plain," I replied. Jim nodded.
"It bears an ugly reputation," he said. "There have been the most extraordinary disappearances there from time to time. The blacks say the place is haunted by a ghost, which they call the Bunyip. Of course, I don't believe in anything of that sort, but it is a fact that a man can scarcely get a black man to cross the plain after dark. 2 or 3 of our settlers have entered the plain alone, and never been heard since. Whether the agency which causes them to disappear is ghostly or otherwise, it is impossible for me to say." "You surely don't believe in the Bunyip," I said, with a slight laugh. "Hush," he answered. "The fact is this, Bell, old man, I cannot laugh over the matter. If anything has happened to Goodwin, I believe he— Hullo, what can this be? Lie down, boy." He added Jim to help, his big collie. We went out into the paddock, and as we did so, a man rode quickly up to him, and Jim recognized as one of the mounted police. "What's up, Jack?" said Jim. "The traveler riding alone in the Black Hole said he got bushed by the Rangers," was the man's reply. "I heard Frank Goodwin has not turned up yet, and it occurred to me that I ought to know at once. The man's horse, with an empty saddle, was found under a boundary fence. It is possible he had an accident. Could you let me have Bill, your black tracker? Poor chap may be limping and cannot move along the ranges. This is not a moment to lose." "Good God! Then it must be Godwin!" exclaimed Jim. "We won't tell Rosalind yet. We will bring Billy and go with you at once, Jack," he continued. "You will come along too, won't you, Bill?" he added briskly. "Anything is better than suspense. I'll get the horses up, and we will start out in a moment, though we won't be able to do much before daylight." In a quarter of an hour we set out. Billy, the black tracker, looked sulky, and was also considerably alarmed. Jim whispered to me that he had great difficulty in making him come at all. "He believes in the Bunyip," he added, dropping his voice low to a hoarse whisper. Billy himself was an ill-favored-looking creature, but as a tracker he was possessed of almost superhuman powers, and was noted all the district as one who could follow any tracks of almost any kind. He had only one eye, the other having been knocked out by a scrimmage, and with that eye he could read the ground, and an uncivilized man reads a book. We started off slowly. Billy was presently induced by the ride ahead. He sucked his pipe as he took no interest in the affair. "Well, we must be somewhere on the ranges," said MacDonald emphatically. "But how he got off track beats me. He knows every yard of the place. There's a foul place somewhere." Just as he said the last words, Billy turned in the saddle, cocking one eye round, and said slowly, "Secret of Emu Plain night time. Bunyip here." "Nonsense, Billy," replied MacDonald almost angrily. "There's no such thing as a bunyip. You know that well as I do." "I see a bunyip once in the Emu Plain along rock," Black went on. "I make tracks, my word." Just as the day broke, our way led out of the scrub, and the trees began to get once more sparsely scattered, till we suddenly burst upon the borders of the great plain itself. A few moments towards, Billy uttered a cry and picked up the tracks. With his one eye fixed on the ground, he dismounted and began to examine some bent grass and disturbed stones. To my unaccustomed vision, the signs that guided him were absolutely invisible, but it was an exhibition of instinct that no one would believe without seeing it. On and on we went through the heat, silent and expectant, now up, now down, now over ridge and gully. Suddenly Bill uttered a sharp cry, and leaping from his horse, gave me the reins and walked round and around, peering about and grunting to himself. At last, looking up, he exclaimed, "Man met someone here." "Met someone?" cried MacDonald. "Are you sure, Billy?" "Quite sure," was the answer. He took his tomahawk and cut a notch in one of the trees in order to mark the spot, then remounted and rode on. The moment Billy spoke again. "More horses, my word," he said. "Look." The marks were clear enough now, even to us. In a piece of soft ground there were hoof marks of 3 horses. Billy said no more, and put his horse in a canter. We followed him. About a mile further we pulled up to the edge of the scrub. We were now close to the great Emu Rock. I noticed at once the number of crows were wheeling around its summit. "Well, is it strange," said Jim, speaking in a hoarse voice, "but I never come near this great rock like that I don't see crows whirling around the top. There they go as usual," he added, clutching my arm. "My God, whenever a man disappears, there are marks of struggle at the foot of the rock. Watch Billy now. He will know in a moment. Oh, merciful heaven! It is true, then, that something has happened to Goodwin. Poor Rosamond. This will break her heart. Yes, there are marks. Billy notices them. Now, Bill, you never had a greater mystery than this to solve. Marks at the foot of the rock. A man disappears, never found again. What does it mean, Bill? Where does he go? There must be a devilry in the matter." Bill dismounted and was bending over the ground. Suddenly he uttered a sharp squirrel cry. "The marks! The marks!" he gasped. "Bunyip here! Man here! Devil taken! See! His intense excitement communicated itself to us. He began to run about, peering down low over the ground. See! He repeated. "They get off here. Go that way. Spur come off." His quick eye had caught the glitter. He picked up the long spur. Yes, it is as it always is. 3 men fight, 2 men go away. 1 man, where you go? Double taken." He pointed to the sky, gazing up, showing his white teeth in horror. "Nonsense, Billy," said MacDonald in a voice which tried to render it commonplace but assured. I looked at him and saw he was shaking from head to foot. "Come away," he said to me. "Poor girl, poor Rosamond. Billy," he added abruptly, turning to a tracker, "we must pick up the tracks of these horses." We mounted and followed the horse tracks again. We ran out the tracks back to the coach road, and then lost them on the confusion of a mob of cattle that had passed during the morning. "Well, this is a bad business," said MacDonald. "Goodwin is missing, and what took place in the plain by the rock, and how he disappeared from the face of the earth, and who are the men who had a hand in it. Unsolvable problems. It is not the first time, Bill, that the horror of this thing. I tell you, I don't like the business at all. It looks uncommonly like another of those queer disappearances." Tell me about them, I said suddenly. He began to talk, lowering his voice to a whisper. A year ago, a man was lost on the Emu Plain. He was a young fellow, an Englishman, and heir to a big property. He was seen to cross the plain on horseback one afternoon, and he was never heard or seen of again. And there were the marks of a struggle by the great rock, just as we saw them today, Bill. His people have spent thousands trying to discover the mystery, but all in vain. Since then, the neighborhood of the rock has been avoided, and the horror of the plain has grown in the minds of everybody. For this disappearance was not the first. Others have preceded it. From time to time, at longer or shorter intervals, a man entered the desolate plain, and never, as far as any human being could tell, left it again. What does that thing pretend? Bill kept honking, "Bunyip! Bunyip!" At last MacDonald shouted to him that he would break his head if he said the word one more time. We returned to the station. Rosamond, with a face like death, came out to meet us. "You must bear up, my dear," said her uncle. "Any news?" she asked. "Well, there were tracks of a struggle on the plain," he said with evident reluctance, "but we cannot follow them. A mob of cattle passed up the road this morning and have confused the tracks."
"Where was the struggle?"
she said in a low voice. MacDonald avoided her eyes, and she gave him a direct and piercing glance.
"Come on the veranda, Uncle Jim. And you too, Mr. Bell, and tell me everything,"
said the girl, whose voice was quiet and had a strange stillness about it. We followed her without a word. She drew deck chairs forward and entered the cool veranda, and then kneeling by the side, she laid her hand on my shoulder.
"Now,"
she said, facing MacDonald,
"tell me all. Where was the struggle?"
"Rosamond, you must bear up. It was in the old spot at the foot of the great rock. There, my girl," he hastily added, rising up as he spoke. "I don't give up hope yet. I will send Jack immediately and have the affair telegraphed all over the country." I left the veranda, walking slowly. Rosamond turned to me.
"My fears are certainties," she said. "And Frank has disappeared just as the other men have disappeared. But, oh my God," she said, rising hastily to her feet, "I will find him. I will. If he is alive, I will find him. And you, Mr. Bell, must help me. You have solved mysteries before, but never so great as this one. You'll help me, will you not?"
"With all my heart, my child," I answered.
"There's not one moment to lose. Let us go at once."
No, Rosamond, that would be madness," I said. "If Godwin is alive, the police will get tidings of him, and if not—" My voice fell. Rosamond looked at me intently.
"Do you think I can rest so?" she said. "If you do not want to drive me mad, something must be done immediately."
"Then what do you propose?" I asked, looking at her.
"Go back with you to the plain to examine those marks myself, to bring my woman's wit and intuition to bear in the matter. Where men fail, many to discover the cause a woman may succeed. You know I am right."
"And I would take you with me gladly if it were possible, but it is not."
"Do you think anything is impossible for a woman? Do you think anything that is impossible for a man is impossible for a woman?" she said. "We can take some food with us and start at once. We won't consult anyone. If we're quick, we can reach the rock in an hour or two before sunset. I know the whole ghastly place as well as we can return by moonlight. So don't oppose me," she added, "for if you do, I will start alone. Anything is better than inaction."
Feisty. I did not say a word. She gave me a quick, grateful glance and left the veranda. Half an hour later, she appeared in the paddock, equipped with a stout habit and mounted on a splendid black horse. She led another by a bridle for me, and we started off at once. We reached the great rock by daylight. The sweltering sun beat down upon our heads, and the arid sand rose in clouds around us, but Rosamond neither faltered nor complained. A spirit burnt within her which no obstacle could daunt. There were marks on the struggle plainly visible. Rosamond knelt on the ground and examined them as close and with a keen eye as even Billy the Black Tracker himself. We walked around and round the rocks, and crows circled over our heads, making hideous noises as they did. But Search as we would, we could not find any clue beyond the very manifest one. That were the three that fought and struggled, and only two had gone away. What in the name of heaven had become the third? Before sunset, Rosamond put her hand in mine.
"Take me home," she said faintly.
I did so. We neither of us spoke on that desolate return journey. Again the next day we visited the rock and made a careful search, and the next day, and the next. Meanwhile the country rang with the disappearance of Frank Godwin, and with news of Rosamond's grief. No clue could we obtain anywhere. We could not get the faintest tidings of a missing man. That it was Goodwin's horse which was found in the boundary fence was beyond doubt. He had started from the station in very good time, and on the fatal morning, and in the best of health and spirits. But from that moment he had not been seen. I stayed with the MacDonalds for over a fortnight, and then, whilst as I was to leave Rosamond in her trouble, I had to take my departure, owing to some pressing business in Brisbane, but I promised to return again as soon as I could. My plan was to ride from my first stage to Corey's selection. Billy would come with me and bring back the horse I was riding. I would then wait for the coach to pick me up. I arrived at Corey's in good time and sent Billy back with my horse, and as there were still some hours before Cobb's coach would pass, it suddenly occurred to me that I could once go again to Emu Rock and exert every faculty I possessed to discover the mystery. Corey and the two friends who lived with him, Englishmen of much his own build and make, were out. I told Corey's black servants that I was going to try and bag a plain turkey, and borrowed one of the guns for that purpose. In about an hour I reached the rock. The sun was already dipping low over the hills. Across the summit of the rock, crows and eagle-hawks wheeled to and fro. I walked around and around it in despair. I longed to tear its ghastly secret out of the silent rock. What strange scene had it not, in all probability, recently witnessed? By and by I sat down at the base of the rock, and watched the shadow creeping across the plain as the sun sank lower and lower. I was just making up my mind to return to Corey's when suddenly, within a few yards of me, I saw something drop on the sand. It made no noise, but it fell and caught my eye. Wondering vaguely what it might be, I got up and sauntered over to the place. I saw something on the ground. It was an odd-looking thing. I bent down to see what it was. As I did, my heart stood still. I was looking at a human finger. The flesh was nearly all picked to the bone. I took it in my hand and gazed at it. My pulses were throbbing, and a deadly fear seized me. Where had it come from? What did it mean? And then in an instant a wild thought struck me. I looked up. Still flying to and fro noisily were the crows and the hawks. One of them had dropped the bloody finger. And it was the body of Frank Godwin at the top of Emu Rock. The idea was monstrous, and yet there was a finger, and the crows wheeling around and around above me. But how could I prove my ghastly suspicion? By no earthly means would it be possible to scale 300 feet of perpendicular rock. If the body of poor Goodwin was up there, how in the name of all that was mysterious had it been put up there? One thing, at least, was certain. I must go back at once to McDonald Station and report the horrible discovery I had made, and arrange for an investigation of the summit of the rock to take place immediately. The Sirocco was still blowing hard, and the great eddies of sand were circling the air. A sandstorm was evidently coming on, but there was nothing for me to do but lie down and bury my face in the ground until it passed by. I did so, my pulses throbbing, the most nameless fear and depression stealing over me. The storm grew greater, and it was upon me. I kept my eyes shut, my face buried. All of a sudden, from what quarter I knew not, there came a dizzy pain. Lights danced before my eyes. I seemed to sink into nothingness. My terrors were lifted from me. I was enshadowed in the impregnable darkness, and I remembered no more. When I came to myself, I was lying on my back and gazing up at the stars. Everything around me was as silent as the grave, except the noise the wind through the scrub brush, which, curiously enough, now sounded far below me. I was lying on hard rock, and every bone in my body ached. I managed to turn myself slowly around and then gazed about me. Where in the name of heaven was I? I saw that I was lying in some sort of basin of rock, at the edge of which some 10 feet above me. But what was the dark mass lying a little to my left? I managed to crawl towards it. Great heavens, it was a human body! The moment I saw it, my memory returned. I knew my last conscious thoughts had been I was in the midst of a sandstorm at the foot of the great Emu Rock. Darkness, drawn too heavy to pain, had overtaken me. When I came to myself, I was at the top of Emu Rock with my body beside me. It was doubtless that of Frank Goodwin. By what supernatural agency was I transported here? For a moment my brain reeled, and I thought I might be the victim of some hideous nightmare. The moon was riding high in the heavens, and the sandstorm had completely passed, and the stars were bright. In this subdued light, I could see every object around me almost as vividly as if it were day. I gazed once again at the body of the man by my side. Suddenly my heart leapt with fresh fear. I raised myself on my elbow and thought I saw the body stir. Could it still be alive? No, yet. It was as if it was poised above the shoulder. Something was moving. Black, a smooth object which swayed gently to and fro with a horrible, perfect regularity. The silence was suddenly broken by a long, low hiss. I now perceived that the coils of the enormous snake heaved and rolled as the loathsome creature slowly unwound itself and glided noiselessly up the side of the rock. Drops of sweat broke out upon my forehead, and for fully an hour I lay still, literally paralyzed with fear. Then the mad courage of desperation seized me, and with reckless disregard for danger from the reptile, I sprang back to the edge of the rock. But as I did, I knew all the time that a pair of glistening eyes had fixed upon me. Never for a moment did they blink or withdraw their gaze. Single-handed and unarmed in a prison from which escape was impossible, I was face to face with this deadly reptile. For all I knew, there might be many others close beside me among the rocks. The dawn began slowly to break. The light grew stronger every moment, as I crouched on one side of my prison, tense and motionless. I knew that, if I stirred, the reptile would spring upon me. It was coiled up now on the rock exactly opposite the spot where the body of Frank Godwin lay. Once I ventured to turn my eyes and look around. 300 feet below stretched the plain. Yes, escape was impossible. Now I had to face either a quick death from the bite of a huge brown snake, or a lingering death from thirst and starvation. Just for a moment, I nearly yielded to a sudden impulse that assailed me, to take one step back over the edge of the basin and end my sufferings instantaneously. But, sick and faint as I still was, I determined to have one last fight before I destroyed myself. Cautiously, and still keeping my eyes upon the brute, I loosened a large flat stone weighing a couple of pounds, and gently and slowly, for all with those eyes which never blinked but fixed upon me, I unfastened my leather belt and made a loop with one end through the buckle. Then, slipping it on the stone, I drew the snap tightly around the stone. Here was an improv weapon, a good one if I chanced to have a first blow. Wrapping the end of the belt twice around my hand, I crept slowly forward across the body of the dead man. And as I did so, the great snake moved to and fro, opening its jaws, and hissed at me in fury. I knew now, in a moment, he would spring. I held up my hand, keeping the strap with the stone at the end well behind me, and then with all the force swung it around my shoulder at the brute. At the same instant, with incredible swiftness, it struck out sideways at me. The huge stone met it halfway, and it fell, with its back broken, at my feet, hissing and wriggling in hideous contortions. I sprang back and once more swinging the stone with all my force, crushed it against its head on the rock. In another moment, I had flung it over and was watching its great body whirling down through the air to the plain below. The immediate danger passed, and I now began, as coolly as I could calculate my own chances. It was impossible to say when the news of my disappearance might reach Jim MacDonald's station. Perhaps not for weeks. Meanwhile, what was to become of me? If there were more brown snakes lurking between the crevices of the rock, I must, at best, slowly die of thirst and starvation. Surely by superhuman agency had I transported by a giddy eminence, but escape was absolutely impossible. Poor Rosamond. I had at last succeeded in my quest, and Godwin's mangled body lay close to me. Was I to share a similar fate? As hopeless as the situation was, as the hopelessness of the situation came upon me, I trembled. The sun was now well up, and I knew that my sufferings from heat and thirst were all too soon to begin. I removed my shirt, and tearing it into strips, fastened them together, then attached the free end to a projection of rock. Then I flung the body of poor Goodwin onto the plain below. As I did so, the grim idea of ending my sufferings by suicide recurred to me once more. If no help came, I would, when my pains became intolerable, fling myself from some dizzying height. I sat down on a huge stone and looked out towards the coach road. The hours dragged wearily on, but no sign of human life did I see. The blazing sun beat mercilessly down upon my head, and by midday the pangs of thirst had almost arisen to torture, and hunger also now assailed me. I was faint, and giddy too, and discovered that I was suffering from a severe blow to the head. Doubtless I had received this blow at the foot of the rock, and it was rendered me unconscious, and the mysterious agency which had lifted me to the height above was then brought into requisition. Were they indeed ghostly hands by which had dealt me this blow? Was the Bunyip a real devil? Was Emu Plain haunted by a horror which admittedly had no solution? From time to time I shouted insanely in order to keep off the eaglehawks and crows which swooped down and wheeled around me. More than once I rose and peered down over the edge of my awful prison. There was not the slightest ledge or projection from smooth sides for more than 100 feet. Escape was out of the question. My weakness was increasing hour by hour, and I resolved that if relief did not come before the sun set tomorrow, I would take that desperate leap and end my sufferings. I dared not sleep, lest I would miss the frail chance of anyone coming, and the whole long night I paced around, shouting at intervals, while my voice became hoarse and thick from my parched lips. As morning broke once more, I was utterly exhausted and lay down. Now half delirious from raging fever, my head felt as if it would burst, and the great rock seemed to reel and totter beneath me. The hours went by, and I know not how. Time seemed nowhere. Reality had merged into ghostly phantasmagoria. Hunger and thirst grew greater and greater. Insensibly, and scarcely knowing why I did it, I crept to the edge of that terrible cup in the rock. I could stand my tortures no longer. Instantaneous death would end my sufferings. I gazed round with haggard eyes for my last look at earth, and suddenly a shrill shout rent the air. I reeled back and clung to the corner of the rocks for support. Once again came the noise. I heard my name, followed immediately by the report of a gun. The next instant I saw, lying across the cup of rock close to me, a thin piece of cord. "Catch it and haul in!" I heard the drawn voice through a telephone from below. I leapt up, and hope had returned, when delirium fell from me like a mantle. The time of myself was once more. I obeyed the words from below, and began frantically to haul in the rope. Coil after coil came up thicker and thicker, till presently I held in my hands a stout rope. I now mustered all my remaining strength and fastened the rope tightly around the neck of a piece of solid rock. After doing this, I remembered nothing more. They told me afterwards, long weeks afterwards, when my fever had left me, and weak as a child I submitted to Rosamond's ministrations. They told me then, in my room at Jim McDonald Station, what had really occurred. Rosamond had the strangest dream of her life. She had gone through overmastering terror. Horror beyond description had visited her. She had dreamt that I was on top of Emu Rock and insisted on going there, accompanied by Jim, Billy, the Black Tracker. At the base of his mighty rock, Evidence was the most terrible character met her eyes, but brave girl as she was, she turned her attention to the rescue of the living. A cord was sent up to my dizzying immense by means of a rocket gun, and then I had fastened the rope to the rock. Billy himself had come up and brought me down. Thus I was saved from the very jaws of death. But what the mystery was, and how Frank Goodwin's body had been hauled up to the top of Emu Rock, and how I myself got there, are insoluble mysteries. I have unearthed more than one ghost in my day, but the great bunyip of Emu Plains has baffled my ingenuity. He has won in the fight, and I bow my head in silence, knowing that he, in his unfathomable mystery, is stronger than I. Oh, there's a solution to this. This was apparently part of a competition. Mystery competition open to all the readers of the above story. This exceedingly clever story is a sequel to the adventures of John Bell, the Ghost Exposer, related for us by Mrs. Meade last year under the title of Master of Mysteries. Some of our readers will remember that Mrs. Meade spoke then of one mystery which John Bell had not been able to fathom. Above the story of the Emu Plain is the mystery in question, that which John Bell could not explain, however, known to the authors of the adventure. We suggest that our readers attempt to solve the mystery themselves, and they will be awarded 10 prizes of 1 guinea each, 10 solutions which, in Mrs. Meade's opinion, are the best sent to us. These solutions are marked Story Prize, and to be addressed to the editor of Castle's Magazine, The Bell Savages, London, EC. Must reach us before the deadline of February 15th. We shall publish Miss Meade's explanation of the mystery in our April number. No person may send more than one solution of the story, and no solution must exceed 300 words in length. Now the actual answer. Before leaving the old country for Australia, Corey, who was a clever mechanician, had engaged a long time of investigating the possible uses of kites for military operations, and had made a large number of very interesting experiments to their lifting power. He found, and his results correctly responded to those of other investigators, that a fairly strong wind, 1 square foot of kite would rise itself half a pound. He found also that to obviate the inconvenience of using a large and unwieldy kite for raising heavy weights, a series of small kites attached vertically one above the other answered the purpose equally well. And by this means he succeeded in raising weights up to 200 pounds by attaching to the ground rope about 6 feet from the lowest of the kites and employing a horse to draw the rope. By this means of slip rope arrangement, an enormous explosive charge could be raised and dropped over an enemy's fortification with considerable accuracy. 3 kites each, 10 square feet, raising 11 stone. Hereditarily tainted with criminal instincts, coupled with a fantastic imagination, the particular construction of the Emu Rock suggested to him by means of kites, the body of a man could be raised and deposited on top where it could never be found by any discoverers. An opportunity for practically putting this diabolical scheme to the test soon occurred. So long as the sirocco was blowing, the feat was comparatively easy. The manner in which John Bell became one of his victims is already known. Okay, well, glad they explained it. I was kind of curious. And my computer's lagging again. Well, let's see. Who is on that we can possibly raid? If anyone has any suggestions, please let me know, because my computer's not letting me see any. In fact, YouTube Studio's spazzing me out too. Dun, 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 dun. is my computer lagging so much? Why doesn't it do it on Thursdays? Yeah, it's saying my CPU is at 100%. Okay, well... there are my raid messages. Or you can make your own if you really want to. How about using this one? And then we can raid Corey. What are you doing, computer? Anyway, fairy tales tomorrow night. Hope to see you all there. Where's my music?
Sheds his skin, gently drifting away, with a twinkle in his eye and a heart full of dreams. He waits for the Friday night glow, where the magic redeems. Oh, the wolf in the moonlight, he's found his true call, reading tales of wonder for one and for all. In a world of stars dancing, his spirit takes flight, with stories of beauty under the stars.